last weekend we went Sunday. But I want to
Supposed to pick me up, you didn't pick me up.
He's Sunday night, but he's on the
You can just turn your button on and talk to the mayor. You're on, you're live.
Check, check. With me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, invocation. Artist, would you like to do the invocation? Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, and as we make decisions that might affect residents of Merced County, and continue to remind us all that what we here do today, it is for the purpose of pursuit of truth and for the glory of you and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you. Roll call.
Director Aguilar? Director Creighton?
Here.
Director Espinoza? Director Hogue?
Here.
Director Lohr?
Here.
Director McDaniel?
Present.
Director Murphy? Director Pereira?
Present.
Director Silvera? Director Vialta?
Here.
Director Oliveira?
Here. Okay, now we'll move on to item 4, approval of agenda. I think Stacy has a.
There I am. Okay. I would just like to note that for item 9B, the air quality conformity analysis for the 2015 ozone standard, that there's been a new resolution circulated. You should have one in front of you, and there are copies for the public. There's just simply some additional language, a line that was added to the last paragraph of the resolution, noting that the resolution would go into effect after EPA's concluded all of their activities. So that will be the attachment under the requested action for 9B.
Okay, thank you, Stacy.
Mr.
Entertain a
Chairman.
motion to approve the agenda. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 5, public comment. Anybody wishing to comment on an item not on the agenda may do so at this time. Seeing nobody, we'll go on to item 6, an action item. We have the minutes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I could just make one, we did receive a request to add language to the Caltrans report for the Merced, for item 6B for the MCAG minutes to reflect continuous reinforced concrete to the section of Tom Dumas's report.
Okay. Moved. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Okay, now we'll move on to item 7, the Caltrans report.
Hilda.
Okay, Hilda's gonna take over for Tom today.
So I do have copies of the items I'm going to go over. It's just a quick update on 5 projects that we have coming up for Merced County that will be in construction between now and June. A lot of these are paving State Route 152, but we do have work on State Route 59 and 140 with the culvert and drainage repairs, and some bridges that are getting seismic retrofitting throughout, and as well as the restriping of State Route 152 throughout from the Madera County line to Santa Clara. So we have a lot of work that'll be coming through the area in the next couple months, but we're excited to see these projects come to fruition. We also have just some quick updates on what our district's been up to. We've had some successful small business council meetings that took place on February 15th, as well as a small business contractors boot camp that took place on March 8th. And it was an excellent turnout and a very successful event. So we hope to continue to have these small business events throughout the next couple years. And then we're also working on a climate change vulnerability assessment that the district will put out and we'll hope to have available for you guys to comment back on as well. And it's going to touch on the stressors of temperature, sea level rise, storm surge, and precipitation, flooding, and wildlife in the area. So definitely look forward to seeing your comments on that once it's ready. We do have release of our winter mile marker, so I'll have copies here for you guys if you're interested in taking one. But I'm also excited to share that we've recently had some funding available through our grants, Sustainable Communities grants, and Tom and I worked very hard with headquarters and were able to allocate the funding to the city of Los Banos, who's working on a State Route 152 specific plan, and they had applied for the Pioneer Road specific plan. So we were able to actually get approval to have them add the Pioneer specific plan. So they will be able to fund both of them and complete them at the same time. So we're going to be working with them to add an amendment to that contract. So wanted to share that. And any questions or comments for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one.
Oh,
Sorry. I just want to stress out that we still need the town of Planada, my district, Highway 140 and Plainsburg still needs the stop sign or stop lights. I know that the numbers that Caltrans has done is not enough for a stoplight, but that's due to the kids not using because it's so dangerous to crossing there. And of course, there's a crossing lanes needed as well. Also on the east side, because there's more crossing over to the taco stand on the east side. But that crossing stop sign and the crossing lane is needed there, much needed. So I'm not gonna stop there because I get harassed and I get talked about all the dangers there in that zone.
definitely.
So yeah, if you can please take it back. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I
And-
had one question. So I had, Stacy had sent out and asked that if any directors had comments directed toward Caltrans to get those into to her in advance so that you would be able to maybe shed some insight or some answers to those questions. One of the questions that it's frustrated probably not only me, and it doesn't actually reside within my district, but one of my colleagues' districts, but a lot of my constituents travel down Highway 59 into Merced, And we have this reoccurring problem that every time we experience, I'm going to call even average rainfall, that at the Mariposa Creek on Highway 59, it always ends up flooding out, and it always ends up having to shut down the road. And it's really puts the county at a disadvantage, because now they're having to reroute that traffic onto county roads, with obviously no reimbursement from Caltrans for the extra wear and tear that's being put on our roads. And then also it's putting, a lot more heavier traffic on our roads at probably when our roads are most vulnerable in the middle of the winter. So I just was curious to know what kind of plan does Caltrans have in place, and if they don't have one, when could we expect a plan to deal with that Highway 59 and Mariposa Creek Bridge?
So thank you for sharing that in advance, because obviously gave me some time to look into it. And we do have a project that's in process. So we hope to have the initial project report approved by June. And it would actually mean award in December of 2024 and construction 2025 of a new bridge.
Again, and I don't like to shoot the messenger, because I know that's what you are, but it just absolutely just blows my mind that it takes that long to get a project done. So if we experience between 2020 and then if we experience 2 years of above or average rainfall, we're going to expect at least 2 of those 5 years of just this burden that's put on our community. It's wasted hours of people's lives. It's wasted road miles. It's really, if we want to talk about the environment, now those vehicles are taking longer to get where they are. That's more pollutants that they're putting into the air. I get it. Caltrans is a pretty big animal and a pretty big bureaucracy over there, but I could just tell you it's frustrating, at least on my end, and I would think that maybe some of my colleagues share it with me, that it takes that long to get a project through. It seems like we got to be better at that. With all the technology that we have, it seems like now that we have more technology, in Caltrans's case, it takes them even longer than it used to when they had to handwrite all these things. So I know you're just the messenger, but I would appreciate if you could pass that message along to your higher ups, and maybe at some point they'll start listening to us.
No, definitely. And in our research, we learned that unfortunately the land that basically butts onto there is private property. So a lot of the issues are coming from overgrown shrubs and things that are on that property. So definitely kind of relay that, if maybe can work something with the landowner in the meantime, because it is going to take a long time since this is construction of a new bridge, but definitely will relay expediting project process, and maybe if they can look into that as well.
And so they considered that to be a construction of a new bridge, even though you're replacing an old bridge?
Right. So it would be because the way that it's constructed right now obviously doesn't meet the needs for the water flow. It would be construction of a new bridge because it has to be the height will be increased. So it'll be higher.
Very good. Thank you for looking into that for me.
No problem.
Mr. Chair, I just want to second those comments on my colleague there, because being in, on my, is on my district, so thank you.
Yeah.
If I could. I just want to correct you. It's not the landowners.
Okay.
It's the Army Corps of Engineers
Oh, good.
that aren't allowing us to clear out those creek beds.
Got
So,
it. Okay.
with your help, if we could get that done, we wouldn't have that problem.
Yeah, I will definitely relay that. as
Sure.
well.
Any more questions for Hilda? Thank you, Hilda.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 8. These items are for information and discussion only. We have the newsletter, calendar of meetings, governing board meeting schedule, Self-Help Counties Coalition letter of support, Measure B expenditures, MCAG financial report for July, and the TRB board minutes from the March meeting. Is there anything the director would like to comment on? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, the consent agenda. Item A, approve the State Transit Assistant Charter 2 distribution, approve the air quality conformity analysis for the 2015 ozone standard. And item C, approve Measure V regional project funding agreement with the County of Merced. This is an action item. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item 10. Another item for information, transportation planning and Measure V update. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Just a couple things. Stacy already sent out to you an email, but I just wanted to say it again that Livingston 99 northbound widening, California Transportation Commission did award the construction funds. So that can go out to bid this summer and start construction hopefully soon after that. So that's really good news. And then the Measure V event, which is coming up April 2nd. At 5:30 to 7:30 at the Senior Center in Merced. And so we did distribute a flyer. So if you can help by distributing that far and wide, and we'll have an overview of the first annual report and what's going on with Measure V. So that's very exciting. And we're exploring an event on the west side to see if we can do something similar over here on the west side. And that's in the works in the early stages. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, hopefully we can work on having something on the west side as well. And then also exploring a roadshow concept, so kind of taking out the materials individually to the communities throughout the county so that they can see it as well. Because there's a lot of good things to say about Measure V and the community would like to see what's going on. And then lastly, the regional projects committees, we had a meeting in January, 2 meetings, the west and east side. And the chairs have directed us to set those next meetings for April 17th, Wednesday, April 17th, the day before the next board. The west one is going to be in Dos Palos at 10 a.m., 10 to noon. And the east one in Atwater at 2 to 4. And I'll send out those meeting reminders probably by tomorrow morning. But I wanted to give you a heads up that those meetings have been set so you can continue the conversation about the regional projects for the next implementation plan. And if you have any questions, I could answer those for you.
Any questions for Matt? Thank you, Matt. Let's go on to item 11, Measure B transit funding request for fare program. Stacy? Oh, you're doing one of those?
Okay, I think we're live. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is simple in its recommendation, and that is that we, after assessing the existing free fare program on the bus for seniors, veterans, and ADA eligible passengers that is provided through Measure V, assessing that program and the ridership and the increase in ridership that we've seen, we found it prudent to come to the board and to request that the annual allocation that funds this program be increased from $150,000 a year to $225,000 a year, starting with the start of the new fiscal year, so July 1. This is really a success story. One, it's a wildly popular program. We have seen, while nationally ridership numbers have been in decline, we've been consistently seeing an increase in our ridership. But why I think we've been able to work with the 150 despite all of the ridership increase has been because the program has actually been subsidized with other grant funds, and those grant funds are over. So what you'll see in the slide, and it's just an excerpt from the staff report, is we assumed if we took away all of the grant funding that was subsidizing this program since its inception and actually charged the actual ridership numbers to Measure V, it would have been almost $160,000. Now, that didn't happen from day one. That was with the growth that we saw over the years when this program started. But we forecasted what that ridership would look like with a 10% increase. We've seen as high as 12%, so it's fairly, I think, a pretty solid assumption. Would require us to have just shy of $200,000. And the reason that my recommendation is including another $25,000 to have it at a $225,000 allocation is that this money isn't being This isn't a check that Measure V is writing the transit agency. It's simply saying for this one fiscal year, so for each fiscal year, $225,000 of the Measure V transit money is essentially frozen. It can't be used for other purposes. And that the transit agency, based on actual ridership, can get invoiced or can send an invoice and get paid through this Measure V fund. So what all of that means is if ridership actually doesn't end up being what we're projecting and we only spend $175,000, the rest of that money stays in the Measure V transit funding account to be used for what other purposes it is. So the reason why I would rather be a little generous in preserving these funds for this purpose is so that we don't see any disruption of service for the populations that this program is intended to serve. And those are the seniors, the veterans, and the ADA eligible passengers. So having that cushion is a very low risk because if it's not needed based on actual ridership, it won't be used and it'll sit in the fund for a future programming purpose. So all of that to say that the staff recommendation is for an increase in the allocation of the Measure V transit funding from $150,000 to $225,000 annually for the free fare program for seniors, veterans, and ADA eligible passengers beginning July 1st, 2019.
Thank you, Stacy. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the directors.
Yeah, Stacy, when we first intended to set this up for this use, what was the percentage that we set, and what is this the percentage of Measure V?
This is essentially 1% of the annual 15 million estimate. If we go on the 15 million a year projection,
Right.
the current allocation of 150 would be 1% of that.
So we're
so-
exceeding the 1%?
Well,
or-
but transit is actually 5%. So 5% of the total pie
Okay.
is for transit purposes. We cannot by law spend $1 more than that 5% for
Right.
transit, I mean, unless it's a local program. But the transit fund for Measure V is 5% of the total. So based on the 15 million annual projection, that's $750,000 a year. So instead of 150 out of the 750, we're proposing 225 out of the 750.
So it's working?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Lloyd, you're down there.
Question. Is there a limit to who can receive the free fares? I mean, we're talking seniors, veterans, and, am I drawing a blank on the other one?
ADA eligible?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of the homeless population. There's a couple of sites where, you know, people are walking down through busy streets if they could bus. And I know there's a shortage of like people trying to get to behavioral health and those kinds of things, so.
Who's on the measure we voted on? Name those three.
Yes, so I want to make sure, are you asking if it would be possible to expand the definition to like maybe a lower income threshold? Or are you asking, because, I mean, if any individual that meets this threshold, if they're over, you know, if they're a senior or they're a veteran or an ADL eligible, would be eligible to use this program. There's no cap. That's why we're increasing it, because we want to make sure as the ridership is increasing that we can continue to offer the program to all of those populations. But I want to make sure I understand your question. Is it about, could we use this also to expand the eligibility? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we could. That would be a decision of the board.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, any more questions?
And then I'll move the increase in allocation.
Okay, we have a motion
I'll second.
and we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, move on to item 12, Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County, our monthly update from Artis.
Just to piggyback on what Stacy said, ridership numbers for Measure V are astounding, and the reason why she's requesting more money. Our ridership for the total program from September to February was over 100,000 riders, and so as she said, we're continuing to see increase in ridership numbers. For our fixed route, for our regular riders, for February it was 65,220, and that figure decreased by 1.77%, but overall ridership was up 10%, and so we're continuing to see an increase in our ridership across transit. And it is true that transit ridership is declining across the nation, but in Merced County, we're continuing to see an increase in our ridership, and so we're really, really proud about that. Also, we have we did a survey just recently for our ridership about an application that we're going to bring before you in the very next couple items, and 61% of our ridership are in favor of using a app to our bus system, and so we want to make sure that the program that we're going to propose would be successful, and so we did a survey to make sure that the numbers would support what we're going to get ready to action for.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 13. Artis is up again for a low carbon transit operation program allocation request.
Thank you once again. As you're aware, the Low Carbon Transit Operation Program, the LC TOP program, we're in our 4th year of that program. In the previous years, we have used that program for fare reduction, and due to restrictions of that program, continue to free fare program is no longer an option. And so 2 of the projects that we're referring to that we would like to use the money for a total of $539,000, as you can see in your staff report, is one for an electronic collection fare system. And that's part of the survey that we did to ensure that our ridership would respond to that fare program. And so over 89% said that they would appreciate the purchase and the installation of an electronic fare program for a total of $374,000. And then the second thing, as we look through our jurisdiction, we will begin a program for our bus stop shelter improvements, and we're seeking $165,000 to refurbish and replace existing bus shelters and amenities throughout our jurisdiction for a total of $539,000.
Okay, this is an action item. We have 2 items to consider. Do you have any questions, directors? Well, do we take them separate or one at a time? Okay, we have item A to adopt the resolution, and item B to approve the appointment of the executive director for as the authorized agent.
Mr. Chair, I'll move.
Okay, we have a motion. Second. And seconded by 2 people. Lloyd? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Artis, you're still up. Item 14, approval of contract amendment number 2 to architect and engineering services for building remodel.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Once again, as you can see from staff report, Transit purchased a building that was next door. You folks authorized us to purchase the building. What we're seeking for is for approval to increase our funding by $17,000 to add an amendment number 2 for services to remodel the building. One of the things that we discovered as we were looking at our plans is that our storage room was much bigger than our conference room. And so we figured that it would be prudent for us to change those plans and to also add other structures to the facility as far as the video and conferencing material. And so that is going to cost us $17,000 to change our plans. And so we're asking that you would authorize the executive director to amend the current contract for architect and engineering services to relate it and to the building remodeling and to increase the contract amount by $17,000.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I'll look for a motion. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item 15, accept the Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County audited financial statements for the year ending June 30th, 2018. Knapp?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, we pulled this item from our packet because not due to the actual audit reports, it was just an attachment that was incorrect. We had our auditors actually do a very thorough audit this year of our TJPA financial statements, and they found no findings. So if anybody has questions about the audits, I'll be willing to answer them.
Chair, I'll move to accept.
Okay, we have a motion to accept. Second. And we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item 16, Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County Financial Report for July 2018 through December 2018. Nav?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're on track to receive a lot of our local and state funding. However, as of 12/31, December 31st, we have not received our federal or state funding. As you can see, you guys passed item for our second quarter STA. So we are on track to receive our funding. It just isn't coming as we would expect. So, but we are monitoring all our expenditures and revenues and make sure we're receiving everything in a timely manner.
Okay, that was information only. Do we have any questions?
No question.
Yes.
Now, do you have any indication when we might be receiving it, or
So-
how long's the delay? Could it be the
So-
shutdown, or?
Literally, we just got an email last week for the 5307 federal funding so we can start drawing down on it. So
Okay.
we usually draw down the whole $3 million at one time.
Right.
The 5311, we haven't got any word on it yet. State STA, we get in quarterly installments, so we get the first and second. LTF, for some reason, we didn't get it for the first 6 months, but we just got our first quarter and second quarter allocation.
So you don't see any services being delayed or
No.
affected by it? Okay.
Okay, any more questions? If not, we'll move on to item 17, Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority monthly update. Brooks?
Good afternoon. Before I forget, I want to introduce Patrick Womble, and it's Weebles Womble, but they don't fall down. So you remember his name? But Patrick is our newest project manager. We have one already, but I looked at the books. We have about 24 projects going right now. And so we're not able to keep up with a lot of the recurring maintenance and systems at the landfills. And so he's been in a much needed position. He was in the budget last year, and it's taken us this long, and mostly me bugging him to leave the UC and come work for us. So we stole him away from the UC. So if you get a chance, say hi. But he's much smarter than me, so he's a good hire. And I have a clicker. And some follow-up items from last month: the Billy Wright landfill purchase, which is the 600 acres potentially north of Billy Wright's site. So we hired a consultant to tell us, is that the only property, the only option out there? Is that the best option? So they basically are just drawing a circle around that site and recognizing that our customers don't want to drive too far. And then, is there water? Is there an access road? Is there a willing seller? And is there somebody nearby that's going to complain about the smell or sound or appearance of a landfill nearby? And so they've narrowed that down to a few properties. So probably next month, I'll have something to show you. It may not be complete, but the idea is they would rank those properties based on that criteria and give us what they think is the best option. And then once we get that point, then we could probably move into more earnest negotiations or something with somebody. I mean, that's all up to y'all, but any questions about that? Okay, the recycling contract, just as a refresher, remember that Republic processes the materials that's collected through some of your curbside programs. China's dropped out of the market. The other countries that were taking the product or can take the product, they've adopted the same very clean, hard to meet standards for contamination. And so the costs are going up everywhere and the value of the product's gone down. So it's a kind of a double whammy. And so we're negotiating with a professional consultant that does these type of contracts and works throughout the state to help advise us and give us options of what can we do, and can we get a better rate, or what are our options with that. So again, that's still in the contract stage. So next month we would have them on board. I don't know if we have anything to report, but I think by May we should have something to present to y'all, and they'll do that.
So when will I'm sorry, I should push that. So when will the consultant be on board?
Probably in a few days, I would hope. I believe they got sent the contract template this week, but that goes through procurement, so I actually didn't see that. We just developed the scope of work, so.
Thank you.
And,
Do you
and
know,
our,
did it go?
our target, the date that we've placed in the contract for the work to begin is April 1. So.
Lloyd?
Brooks, something struck me. You've made a comment twice about the contamination in the product that was going to China. So is China taking product if it's clean?
Yes.
And
Some
so-
products, they're not taking the paper and some plastics. Am I correct? Which ones are they? Okay. But their threshold is 1/2 of 1%.
Oh,
1/2 of 1%.
So it's not
That's
attainable.
really hard to, if you've seen the way recyclables are collected at your curbside program, so it's newspaper and plastic and glass and bottles and cans and whatever, and you have to get that down to 1/2 of 1% of just this type of plastic. And
so it's just
this-
not practical to do?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really difficult to meet that.
And Brooks, remind us again, I always think it's powerful of what the threshold used to be. I mean, the contamination threshold used to be significantally higher, so.
Yeah, I think the average is 15 to 30% contamination is what was being sent. And now it's 1/2 of 1%. That's really, it's,
So Merced, are they also gonna come up with a plan? Because all the articles I've been reading now in municipalities throughout the United States, it's costing them double what it would cost to put it in the ground. And, the recyclables. And so I guess part of their scope is to come up with suggestions and what we should do in this county then, correct, with the recyclables?
correct. We've specifically asked that. We want them to advise us what will be the impacts of those type, drastic options of stopping the program temporarily till it's worked out.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, I still have, sorry, one more. The gas to energy project. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty here of, it's either go, no go is the language we're using. So we just have the environmental review to do. And again, we don't know of any hurdles, but you have to get through that. And then once we get that, then we can negotiate a power purchase agreement. And then it pretty much just comes down to whether we're agreeing to the cost of the electricity, our cost to provide it, and their willingness to pay for it. And so then that's going to come back to y'all, and we're just going to have a sensitivity analysis of here's how much revenue we anticipate to make beyond all of our expenses, and is that enough revenue for you to be comfortable? Because we don't want to end up in a situation where we actually are paying for the project, or I don't think any of you want that. What we want is it to be cost neutral for us. So we are having 100,000 tons a year less greenhouse gas emissions, but we still want it to be a project where we're making enough money to pay for itself. And so that's what we're still planning to bring back to you, is that some modeling with the scenarios for that. And again, you'll make the final decision. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sure the UC would like to pay for it, so
Yeah.
please keep that in the negotiations.
Honestly, I mean, they're a little bit hard-nosed, but I really do get the sense that they do want this project to go through, because we've been getting, you know how long, we've been working on this 4 years, and the responses over the last few weeks have been very quick. They are getting back to us right away when we request something.
I guess we're all paying for it somehow anyway.
Thank you, Brooks. Now move on to item 18, information item. Jennifer, diversion program update.
Good afternoon, thank you. So the first thing there is the CowerCycle site visits. That is what happens every year, where CowerCycle staff comes down to monitor the programs that are happening within the jurisdictions areas. That's going to include C&D, which is construction and demolition diversion, what your residential programs look like as far as trash, recycling, green waste, if that's applicable. And then the commercial programs, which is the mandatory commercial recycling and the mandatory commercial organics recycling. So they look into those programs, and I do help the jurisdictions with those site visits. So I go to the site visits with Public Works staff to meet with CowerCycle, and then we kind of discuss the programs and what they need to do if they are not on track or if they need to get on track. So just want to give you the heads up of that. So the Public Works Department is primarily the people that we meet with, but city managers usually know as well. Okay, so then the next one's about the tire amnesty events, mattress events. I kind of put this all on the sheet, so on that, the enclosed attachment to this item. It's just all kind of in just a one-page overview. These are going to be the community cleanup events that happen throughout the region. This is where we meet with all the jurisdictions, public works departments again, and the haulers to discuss when they're going to have their community cleanup events so that we can stay open longer on certain Saturdays for the landfills. And during these events, we have grant funding from Cal Recycle to do tire amnesty. Amnesty means that it's a tire surrendered by the public. So for high volume areas or high volume cleanups, we do try to get a trailer out there that's delivered by a tire recycler and then picked up later that day by the tire recycler to get processed and recycled. So that saves your jurisdiction the cost of the $3 each per tire if you were to bring it to the landfill during these events. And then it also saves our time of having double-handled tires. So that's where you can see the events. So the larger ones, like for county area, would be Delhi, Winton, Planada, and then the larger cities have them. Actually, I think most of the incorporated, yes, all the incorporated cities have them. The city of Livingston and Gustine, they're standalone events because they don't have cleanup events in that area. So the reason why I wanted to pair us up with the mattress recycling one right here is because I wanted you to see the cleanup events that also have diversion of mattresses. So through the Mattress Recycling Council, which is a statewide program, the jurisdictions contract with this company directly, and when that happens, you can get tire collection trailers out at your cleanup events. So I've organized all of your public works departments on a group email and coordinated with the Mattress Recycling Council so that if they would like to get a trailer out there, they can coordinate that directly with the Mattress Recycling Council. So again, that saves the jurisdictions money as well because you're not paying the $5 each mattress. So these trailers can hold up to about 150, 160 mattresses. For some of the larger cities like Los Banos and even Atwater, you're getting 3 trailers delivered. So that's about 450 mattresses that are not being disposed of. They're getting recycled and you're not having to pay those costs. And then the landfills are saving that airspace. So they bring out 53-footer trailers. Was that 53 foot by 8 feet wide? And so for all these events, those are getting diverted out of the landfill so that then can make room for, let's say, a walking floor of trash. So it's actually better for the landfill's health, even though we're not getting the per mattress fee on that end of it, we're getting room for solid waste. And I wanted to throw in there also the hazardous waste events that we're having throughout the year. So we do 2, you guys call it the west side, I call it the south side. I feel like that's more southern. So these events, there's twice a year in Los Banos and then 4 times a year out at the Merced landfill. And these are gonna be free to residents of the Merced County area. So even though the Los Banos ones are held in conjunction with the City of Los Banos events, the household hazardous waste side of it, collection side of it, is open to all residents of Merced County. So people from Dos Palos, Volta, Centinela, even Gustine can go over to those events that are more located closer to them in Los Banos. So that those are the dates, the times, and the locations for those. Businesses are also welcomed. They just have to pay for those services. Do you guys have any questions? I could go that kind of quickly.
I got one.
Any questions? Oh, Scotty?
Would you say they're going to send 3 trucks for mattresses? And so I'm guessing you have some historical data that says that you'll get about 3 trucks worth of mattresses?
Yes. So they started with, I think, 1 the first time they did. It was a ton of mattresses. And so they did 2, and then they increased it to 3. And there's actually been, so the last one was in the fall. There were still some left over from even that event. And actually, they dropped the ball on that one, not to throw them on the bus, but they actually forgot about that event. So there were a ton of mattresses that we also had to hand off the landfill that day, which actually was really helpful to see the amount of mattresses that we would get if we didn't have this program, or the state didn't have the program.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 19, contract authorization for the preparation of landfill gas to energy project environmental documents. Brooks?
Yes, sir. And can I back up 1 second? I forgot to show a couple of slides on my oral report.
Oh,
We
we
can't go
gotta go
backwards.
through, we gotta,
Okay, I think it's laptop,
1, 2,
laptop.
3.
laptop.
There we go.
I apologize about that. I just want to give you a heads up that we don't have a lot of new projects that you're going to see in the budget that's upcoming. But one of the biggies is the master plan for the site. So Highway 59, we're trying to, the areas that can be landfill, we're going to try to maximize those as landfill. And then the areas that can be for customer service and diversion programs, maximize that at the same time. And as part of that, we've got to move the infrastructure that's in the valley for the valley fill. And so you've probably heard a little bit of all these, but this is the master plan for the whole site is where we would be heading. And so this is a picture of the valley fill. So on your left would be phase 5 and on the right, phase 4. So that's all the infrastructure for what we do other than landfilling is basically right there. And all that's got to be moved. And so what we want to do is look at the whole site, and just as a basic concept, that's phases 1 through 4. So that's the area that will be landfill now and valley fill in the future. That's phase 6. That's where we're putting waste now, and that whole area will be developed out. This is part of the plan to have 65 years for the whole site. And the middle area is a conservation easement. So when they did phase 6, we impacted some vernal pools and they were reconstructed in that center. So what's left is basically just these 2 spots. And the spot on the left is the current office area, and we would like to reuse that for our diversion programs. And so these are all the things that are happening if you're not just landfilling something or bringing in green waste. These are all the products that you're bringing in, and you essentially have to drive to different locations for all of this. And so what we want to do, instead of a one-stop shop, is a one-stop drop. So you just pull in the scale house, take the first right, which is our current office, and be able to drop off all of these materials and then go into the landfill and dump your load and come back out. And so it'd be a customer service convenience, and then it's some upgrades to the facilities. And we have not had permanent facilities at the site ever. The scale house is the first permanent building that's ever been built since the 70s. And to show you what I'm talking about, here's the HHW facility. There's one permanent building, but permanent pole barn, but everything else is just these little portable sheds. And then our fuel tanks are out in the open and in the dirt. And then this is the shop. The maintenance building for the facility was built in '73. It was built by the employees. And that's the way it looks today. There's holes in it. And I'll show you more pictures. There's our storage facilities. I think those are from World War II, truck body beds. So we're looking to make some upgrades and some improvements. And one of the biggies will be a new office building at the back side of the site. Currently been in a portable, and it is more expensive, and I've been telling you that right up front. A portable can be cheaper, but if you're looking at 65 years life on the site, I think it's better to put the investment into a permanent building, and that hasn't been done before. They've never had permanent break rooms and locker rooms and office area, but that's one of the things that's coming up in the budget. So if you're not making any decision today, I just want to give you a heads up about it. Okay.
Very good.
Thank you. And now we're to the item 9. Okay.
Move on to
This action is to hire Ascent. And Ascent is a environmental engineering firm that helps do the environmental impact reports and CEQA. And you would recognize that name before because we went out to bid and they did the Valley Fill project, and we got CEQA done with no problems whatsoever. And then we hired them again to work with our engineers that are designing the gas to energy project. So they reviewed the design basis memorandum. In other words, you base the environmental impact on what you're going to build. So they interfaced with our engineering firm to advise them of what they think would be permittable through the process. And so it was in the $30,000 range. We did that contract. So we're asking to come back to them to do the actual CEQA document for the project. And so we estimate that we think it'll be around 80,000, but we put 100 in there because you never know what happens when you're going through CEQA.
Okay, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve.
Got a motion to approve? Second. And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, item 20, the financial advisory services for landfill gas to energy project financing.
Thank you. And so concurrently with the environmental review, we're looking at the financing. We're probably going to need to borrow money, go to a bond process to do this. And we're recommending that we hire a financial advisor to tell us what's the best way to get the money and get the lowest interest rate and the best terms for the deal, and basically help protect us through the process. Is that a good way to put it, Emily? And so we're just going out to RFQ RFP at this time, but we want your permission to know that we're doing that. And then we will come back to you in a month or so with an actual contract with the selected vendor. So we're just letting you know we're doing this and keeping you up to speed on the project, because we'll have to have the financing in place by midsummer if we're going to be able to build this in time for the 2020 pan, match up with the 2020 pan.
Any questions? Okay, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Brooks.
Thank you.
Item 21, Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority financial reports.
And,
Hi, Nadia.
Yes, I'm Nadia. She couldn't make it this afternoon, so I just will cover it real quick. And I just cut and pasted a few of the highlights from the budget there. The main thing is that we had budgeted 13.25 million, and that was based on that we don't always assume that we will get all the imported volume. They don't have to come to us, so it may not arrive. So we're conservative, even though we hope to get it, and so we're looking like we're going to get it. So it looks like we're on track to make 17 million. And the 13 million covers our operating cost, our bond cost, our debt, and our future capital. So this is true additional revenue from expenses. And then just to give you a perspective of what's been happening out there the last few years, I put together this slide. So this was the cash we had on hand in 2013. We had about 20 million, but 5.5 was dedicated to the old bond as kind of the security money for that bond. That was required. We couldn't do anything with it, and it was going to be the last payment to the bond. So we had about $15 million of liquid cash, and today we have 36 million, and without a rate increase over 6 years. So we're doing pretty well financially.
Real well. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, this information only.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're down to other reports. Stacy, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Chair Oliveira, Vice Chair McDaniel, Directors Pereira, Hogue, and Creighton for their participation at the CalCog conference in Yosemite last week. I think we all had we had a good amount of time to connect and to kind of talk about some of the topics, but I think something that Matt and I will continue to talk about and bring back as things develop is this growing discussion that the governor initiated in his proposal to link housing and transportation funding, and a lot of conversation around the role of the COG in how that all plays out. So we also heard it from Stephen Qualls with the league at the TRB meeting. And so I wanted to mention it because depending on how you hear about some of the ideas and some of the proposals, some may suggest that the COGs are looking to play this play this role. I will say, at least among our colleagues in the Valley, it was a little bit of a surprise to see how this, how the governor's proposal was, shaped up around the role of the COGs. So we're paying attention. There's nothing we need to do now, but it will be a growing conversation that we will need to start addressing as you all are already locally around the requirements he's looking at for the production of housing and whatnot. So that's a conversation for a later date. But I did want to thank the directors who took their time to spend with CalCog and the Local Government Commission last week. I also want to mention, I think it might have even been last month, but I know we were on a tight schedule at the end of last meeting, but that Artist Nav and I attended a transit symposium in Bakersfield a few weeks ago, and the big takeaway, and something that you'll hear more about when we have our budget presentation for you next month, is a focus next year on how the transit agency will be meeting the state mandates in incorporating electric vehicles into the fleet. We do have requirements to begin a quarter of our purchases after 2023 will need to be electric vehicles. So in our budget for next year, we'll be bringing on a consultant to do what's called an EV rollout plan. It's a document we're required to do, but our intention is to be an early adopter of some of those goals so that we can start incorporating electric transit vehicles into our fleet before we're required to do so. So that was a great opportunity to get some very local. Chair Oliveira and I were talking before the board meeting started about how sometimes it's difficult going to conferences and the content being very urban centric or LA, San Francisco centric. And in fact, that we went to this Kern symposium. One, it was convenient because it was a day we took the train and it was fantastic. But two, it was very relevant and applicable in the valley. Even though Bakersfield and Kern is the larger than we are, we didn't have that problem where we were able to see real applications to these transit agencies in the valley. And I think we came away with some really great ideas that we'll be looking into for the next fiscal year. Also, our annual unmet transit needs process is wrapping up. The SSTAC has made their recommendation after doing the unmet transit needs hearings. Our staff is working on developing that report. It will also be an item that will be coming up for the board's consideration. Likely maybe not next month, but the month after. And of course, that is tied to how LTF funding is allocated. The first is to address any unmet transit needs that are found reasonable to meet. So that's an item that will be coming before you in the next couple of months. And then just one more thing before I say the last thing. Is I did send out an email, but just as a reminder, there are two conferences that the agency really encourages our board to consider. One is the CalCog conference, and the second is the San Joaquin Valley Regional Policy Conference. That's coming up in May 8th. It's actually the evening of the 8th, all day on May 9th, and half a day on May 10th. It's in Lemoore at Tachi Palace. And the agency, it budgets, so where we're positioned to help share a cost for any of the directors that would want to go there, go to that conference. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. Again, it's a unique opportunity to hear about efforts and projects and progress in the San Joaquin Valley. And our turn will come to host that here sooner than I would like, but our turn's coming. And then lastly is just a reminder that our next board meeting is April 18th, but we will have a budget workshop immediately before the board meeting. So we typically start these, I think, at noon and feed you lunch, and it's a long day. So we're actually going to start at 1:30 and do our best to keep it at an hour and a half, if not less, for all of the agencies. And it'll be in room 310 at the county, and then the board meeting is in the county chambers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. Okay, director's reports. Director Silvera, Director Hoag.
I would just like to thank you for inviting me to the CalCog leadership event. That was fun. This weekend is my coffee saloon open house from 12 to 5. So if you would like to come to Dos Palos, we will be having a barbecue and sample drinks. And we are having a cleanup day on April 6th. So those of you, April 5th, sorry. So anyway, that's what's going on in my life. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Pereira.
Yes, reporting out that I went to the CalCog conference. It was very interesting, very informative, and very frustrating. As on one end of the spectrum, we have the state or our government, right, telling us that we need to cut back on greenhouse emissions. Companies have to pay carbon credits, and which has caused a great increase to the cost of doing business and building. And then on the other hand, the state wants us to set up and make available and get built affordable housing. And, they're just really diametrically opposed to each other, right? The more you raise the cost, the harder it is to get stuff built. And so there goes the state frustrating Lloyd Pereira. But anyways, and thank you to Stacy for doing such a good job of, making sure we're connected to the right things and processing it with us. And, did a great job. She had her family up there, and you know, she was, well, at one time, she was willing to come and help me find a bus route versus going with her kids, and it was her time off, and so thank you for taking such good care of us. But anyways, I'm
Making me
glad you got
blush.
to, well, you do a great job, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lohr.
Yeah, the other idea I wanted to sunshine to you, and some of you have probably already talked to them, but Peninsula Community Energy, it's San Mateo County. They, as a JPA, all the cities, I think there's 16 cities maybe, and a couple of, and the county voted to provide the generation part of your electric bill if you're a PG&E customer. And so they actually have a 200 megawatt site out here by the Billy Wright landfill. It's called the Wright Solar Project, and that's where they buy their power to provide to their customers. And anyway, so they would like to share that model with others. And so I think Supervisor Silvera and I were both at the grand opening or the groundbreaking out here at the site and made contact. Anyways, so they would like to bring that forward. I think they've had conversations with a few of you, and so just, you know, let you know that that's coming forward. I think Darren has some of their pamphlets that kind of explains it. If did you bring them in, Darren?
I did, they're in my car.
But we can get those to you if you have some questions.
Okay, thank you. Director Lohr.
Thank you. I did stop by Coffee Saloon on the way here. So for those of us going back home, they're open until 7. So the coffee's really good. The location is really cute. So check it out. Thank you.
Director McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to report out as well. I did attend the CalCog LGC Leadership Conference. We did have the opportunity to present our castle project, which it was, some folks were kind of giving me the evil eye until I told them that we could take 35 trucks per train load off the road. Then it changed the whole dynamic, and it was a success. I also will be attending the San Joaquin Valley Policy Council Valley Voice in Sacramento on April 4th. I think that's the right date. So I just want to, April 3rd, and I was. Wednesday the 3rd, so I just want to make sure I report that out as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Creighton.
I too want to report out that I went to Yosemite for the CalCog meeting. That was my first event as a MCAG board member, and it was a great experience. I got to network with other counties and agencies in the state, which I think Director Pereira said, our views here in the valley don't necessarily align with those on the coast, and we're the minority there, so we need to be cognizant of what's going on, and we need to have that voice given to the governor that one size doesn't fit all. And I think that was the theme of the representatives from the valley. So I think our staff's doing a great job. We're doing some pretty cutting edge things here in the valley, and I think we need to tout what we're doing, that we're doing things better than some of the coastal regions, and it was really positive. It was good to see the valley was standing on their own 2 feet. Thank you.
Director Espinoza. Nothing to report today. Mayor Valata.
Well, I met with the Peninsula Energy Group this morning, and they kind of explained the process. I went to the open house, and what they told me was they're looking for new customers because it's kind of the opposite of the electrical use. In the summertime, the Bay Area doesn't use as much power as it does during the winter. So during the summer, we use a lot of power, and it's the opposite here in the valley. So they're looking for new customers to balance out their profit margin. And so they offer right off the bat 5% less than PG&E, and it could be higher than incentives that they could give each community. So I think it's well worth it just to meet with them and outline what their proposal is. And they also said they wouldn't be going into places where MID provides power. And so MID, I guess, provides power to Livingston and Atwater, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So they weren't going to tackle that, so it wouldn't be the whole county, it would just be, you know, parts of the county and then the incorporated cities. So it's probably worth a meeting with them, so I don't know who's gonna set that up, but we should, and I know Gustine's city manager met with them today too. So I think we should do it. Then last night at our council meeting, we adopted, after a lively discussion, a auxiliary unit ordinance. And if you haven't already done that in your cities, you should do it, because if you don't, the auxiliary units are then governed by the state of California, and it's additional housing, which means that you could have granny flats and basically build a 500 to whatever the half of the size of your house is in the back of your residence if it qualifies. But the ordinance states what we wanted it to state, and if a city doesn't adopt an auxiliary unit ordinance, then the state then regulates what can happen. Ours basically says that that you have to be owner occupied in order to build an auxiliary residence. And if I'm reading this right, if you don't adopt an ordinance, then it could just be a rental unit, and someone could have a rental unit and put a rental unit in back of that and kind of clutter up your town. So everyone should probably look into that if you haven't already done so. And with that, thank you to MCAG and the other groups that put together the van connection. It's a good start for us because we're looking to get bus service through Los Banos. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Counselor, do you have anything you want to add?
Oh, you gave me the chance, so I have to say it. I've seen many of you in the last couple of weeks. I've been out touting the upcoming CASA fundraiser on April 6th. Directors Silvera and McDaniel will both be part of the program, so it's your opportunity to come harass them. So I hope to see you all there. If you need tickets, please contact me.
Thank you. Yeah, I too attended the CalCog conference, and all in all, it was, some of the speakers were very entertaining. And there was one, she talked so fast, I think I must listen slow because I was about 4 sentences behind her all the time. So I didn't get much out of that.
Well, we were all asleep, I think, after that.
Yeah. And the highlight for me was actually the John Muir presentation. The guy, he would look like John Muir. I had heard a comment when we were leaving that somebody said, I didn't know John Muir was still alive. But that was real interesting what he had to say. But there being no further business before the MCAG board, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for attending, and thank the city of Los Banos for use of their facility.
Come back.